part 34 of Folk Trees Could Talk. It's been a few weeks since I've posted a video blog, but here I am again and so glad that you chose to join me today. I appreciate you so much and I'm thrilled to be able to share my romance suspense story of Folk Trees Could Talk with you. Today we began in chapter 17 entitled The Tyrant. Amelia's gut told her that nothing about Mr. Hodges was pleasant or genuine. She didn't trust him and had intended on making even more visits to Glenview in the next few weeks. As she and her parents left his office, they went straight to the nurse's station as they waited for a new room to be prepared. They felt like they won a little victory today by Mr. Hodges allowing Henry and Helen to at least stay in the same room. When Nurse Wanda saw them, she immediately ran and hugged them. She was sorry that Mr. and Mrs. Tyler had to return, but she was delighted to see them again. "Mr. Tyler, you sure did give us all a scare," she scolded. "Now, why did you go and do that to this old nurse? Don't you know I'm not getting any younger? How are you, Mrs. Tyler? You are simply in bloom with the color in your cheeks. You both sure are looking good." "Yes, real good," Nurse Wanda stated as she let out a giggle. "Nurse Wanda, we apologize for putting you in this awkward situation, but Henry had been like a caged bird. Going home to be in familiar surroundings was the best possible medicine for him. He is doing so much better. He's coming back to us. Thank you so much for all that you've done for us. We truly love you, sweet lady," Helen replied as she grabbed Nurse Wanda's hand and patted it gently. "Now, that is the best news we've heard around these parts, and Lord, I don't even know how long. Both you and Mr. Tyler are getting better. That's the important thing," Nurse Wanda continued. She started to warn the Tylers once again, but just as she began to whisper the words, "Y'all keep an eye out for Mr." "Nurse Wanda, may I speak to you immediately, please?" Mr. Hodges interrupted. "Yes, sir, I'll be right there, sir," Nurse Wanda yelled as she squeezed Miss Amelia's hand. She then whispered, "Watch, watch, Miss Amelia." Amelia, of course, was confused, but at the same time she somehow knew that Nurse Wanda was warning her to keep an eye out on Mr. Hodges. Again, Amelia did not trust him and felt like he would try to retaliate against her parents for putting Glenview's reputation at risk. But Amelia really had no idea how evil Mr. Hodges really was. Mr. Hodges told Nurse Wanda to go to a patient's room several rooms down while he spoke once again to Mr. and Mrs. Tyler. "Come with me, please," he commanded. The Tylers followed obediently along with Amelia by their side. Mr. Hodges led them down several long corridors to the very end room. As he walked rather quickly in front of them, Helen was having a little difficulty keeping up, but still she pressed on without uttering the first complaint. When all of them were finally at the end of the hall, Mr. Hodges said with a defiant smirk, "Voila! Here is your suite, Mr. and Mrs. Tyler. Oh, and sadly, I must inform you that because of the new suite arrangements, it will no longer be possible for Nurse Wanda to be your attending nurse. Nurse Melba Applegate will be your attending nurse on this floor of Glenview from now on. I am sure she will serve you very well." Amelia's face burned with anger as she seen the obvious revengeful attitude that Mr. Hodges had toward her parents. She became very alarmed that he would even try to harm them in some way. She, however, held her tongue while in her parents' presence. As Henry and Helen entered into their suite, they were not surprised in its appearance. They too felt that Mr. Hodges would go to any lengths to try to punish them for their behavior, but they truly did not expect what they saw. There was nothing new whatsoever other than the location of the room that Mr. Hodges called a suite. At first glance, the pale soiled gray walls boasted some similitude of a stencil fleur-de-lis design patterned throughout. The design had probably been placed into the walls when the facility had been built. There was not any windows to let any natural light shine through from the outside. The only light source, with the exception of a lame floor lamp that had a dingy beige shade in the corner, was one fluorescent light fixture mounted to the ceilings that had two long white parallel light bulbs. The furniture decor consisted of one high-back worn upholstered chair that was pushed into a corner to the left of the room. Opposite the high-back upholstered chair was two straight-back side chairs that slid under a small wooden table. The table sat to the right of a bed. The bed, which might have been full size, from all appearances seemed to be older than the wallpaper. The heavy metal frame sprawled out like a spider in the middle of the room. The bed had two legs on each side that was placed on the floor. However, the bed also had two more legs on each side that were equipped with casters and wheels that locked. Finally, built into the wall, there was a wooden wardrobe and a chest of drawers. Once inside the tiny room, only then could a small door be seen behind the entrance door that led to the restroom. As Henry and Helen looked over the dismal room, Amelia became more and more enraged. She looked at her precious parents, who had done nothing but help neighbors and friends their whole entire lives, and became sickened that Mr. Hodges chose such a room for them to recover in while they were at Glenview. How dare he try to belittle and punish her parents with such open detest and think he would get by with it? "Mr. Hodges, may I see you in the hallway now, please?" Amelia demanded as her heart began beating faster and she could feel her face burning. She trembled inside with anger at the thought that Mr. Hodges would stoop so low. She tried to calm herself down as to speak to him without screaming. When Mr. Hodges looked at Amelia, he obeyed immediately and met her demands. "Mr. Hodges, I do not know what you are trying to prove at Glenview, but this so-called suite is totally unacceptable. I will not stand by and let you make a mockery out of my parents. I will have Mr. Henderson in this place so quickly that you will not know what hit you. Do I make myself clear?" Amelia spewed. "Now, Mrs. Steele, you must realize that we do not honor the request of spouses cohabitating in the same room here at Glenview. We are trying to accommodate your request. Unfortunately, this suite is the only one that is available," Mr. Hodges lied. "Well, you better make something else become available, Mr. Hodges. You will not humiliate my parents in any way. Do I make myself clear? I just wonder if you would do this to my parents. Whose other parents are you mistreating at Glenview? Wouldn't it be interesting to find out who else is privileged to get these kinds of luxury suites?" Amelia threatened. Mr. Hodges, angry himself, cleared his throat and glared at her with pure evil in his eyes. He then whispered in a tone that almost sounded like a growl to Amelia, "Don't you ever threaten me again, lady. You, Miss Steele, do not know who you are dealing with, and neither does your kooky, senile old parents. Go tell your Mr. Henderson anything that you want to tell him, but let me forewarn you that it will be your parents that pay the ultimate price. Do I make myself clear, Mrs. Steele?" "Perfectly clear indeed, Mr. Hodges, and obviously you do not know who you are dealing with either. I demand that you place my parents in a decent room with a window right now, and that Nurse Wanda be reinstated as their nurse. She knows my parents, and my parents trust her. I see what you're trying to do by isolating my parents. I will not stand for it. I demand you do it now," Amelia screamed. "If I won't give in to your demands, Mrs. Steele, how then shall you threaten me?" Mr. Hodges once again whispered. "Watch me, Mr. Hodges. Watch me turn my threats into action," Amelia boldly stated. "Obviously, you do not know about all the ties to Mason Creek and Mason Creek's residence that my parents hold. My fathers owned and run the local hardware store longer than I have been alive. They know practically everyone in this little town, with the only exception being those who have possibly moved into town while they've been in Glenview. All I would have to do is to let my parents' friends and neighbors know how they are being mistreated here." "How many of their parents or relatives do you have in your facility, Mr. Hodges? What effect do you think that might have on your little untainted reputation?" Amelia fired back. Thank you once again for tuning in or reading along with me. It is my hope that you have been enjoying my romance suspense novel, If Oak Trees Could Talk, for it is my pleasure to have shared it with you. As always, I would love to hear from you. I want to thank all of you that have begun following my WordPress blogs. Please continue to tune in as we are moving right along through the book. If you're interested in obtaining your own copy of If Oak Trees Could Talk or any of my other books, please visit my Amazon author page. Also, if you are new to my video blogs and would like to catch up on the story from the beginning, please check out the archives in this blog or simply subscribe to my YouTube videos as they are numbered and in order. I am also a weekly contributor to the Lakeview Times. All of my videos are published each week at www.lakeviewtimes.com.